ticket here. So it is Monday the 15th of August 2016 and I am in Tokushima, the Take area of Tokushima. That's where my mother-in-law lives. We're here for the Obon holiday and Aurora Dori, of course. Tokushima's famous festival at the same time. But that's not why I'm talking. I'm not really here to talk about sort of touristy stuff, fun as it is, and there is a video coming next about that. I filmed once again Aurora Dori. But I'm here to chat about Sagamihara and Satoshi Uematsu's killing of 19 disabled people, wounding 26 others. I should have spoken about this before, but like many people, well, like many people, I've found it difficult really to talk about it, really to think of something to say about it. But I've also been unable to actually sit down and make a video about it, because I've actually been quite busy writing about it for newspapers. Now, in case you don't know, and that you might not know is the reason why I'm making this video, on July the 26th in Sagamihara, Kanagawa Prefecture, that's nearest Tokyo, it's a prefecture next to Tokyo, a man called Satoshi Uematsu, 26-year-old and former employee of a care facility for the, well, intellectually disabled. Most of the residents had intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities which caused intellectual problems, as it were. So this Satoshi Uematsu is a former employee. He, in the middle of the night, on the 26th of July 2016, goes in, stabs 19 people, killing them, and injures 26 others. And it's been widely reported here in Japan. However, and this is what I'm sort of going on to talk about, this is why I've sort of restarted this little blog series I have called Cripple in Kansai. Because I have cerebral palsy and I'm married to a Japanese lady with cerebral palsy. So this really does mean a lot to me in a way. I really did think about it. Some people from the disability community outside of Japan have made note of the fact that not much press was made apparently in America about it, or in Britain for that matter, and that they perceived that it wasn't really spoken about much here. Now, it has barely been off the television. You may be right that maybe there could be more, not being off the television here in Japan, you may be right that there could be more said about it, there could be more disability voices, and I and my wife in our research at university often talk about that. There could be more on television, more in the media about disability in Japan. Though it is worth pointing out, there was a half an hour long program called NHK Barrier Free, or NHK Barabara to give it its full title, which is a weekly program that is led by people with disabilities. I've been on it, and they had a half an hour, almost 40-minute discussion about Sagamihara and the murders. So it really does get press. Even the Rio Olympics hasn't actually knocked it off the news items. Just a couple of days ago, August the 11th, it was reported that the police were reapplying to further Uematsu's detention. A formality to keep him arrested whilst they gather evidence. He gave himself up. So yeah, he's going to jail. In fact, he's probably going to get the death penalty. Hanging in Japan is the only sentence. It's the sentence you get. And that doesn't sit well to me, really. I'm not pro death penalty. Don't get me wrong, he killed people, he deserves it. But I've just never sat well with taking one life for another. But ultimately, that's not my only reason. I also think that death isn't a punishment. The point of the criminal justice system is the fact that it's an inconvenience to be denied your freedom. When you're dead, you're not going to do anything. You're not being denied anything. You're simply non-existent. When you're locked up, you're denied your freedom, and that's the punishment. But that's a separate issue. So what I was saying about is how some people, especially abroad, think that there hasn't been any public outcry and they point to a Kyodo news report, and it sometimes incorrectly references a Japan Times report, saying that the headline was something like "Care Home Massacre Investigated as Mercy Killing," and they picked on the mercy killing thing. And maybe it was badly said, but here's the thing about Kyodo News. Kyodo News is the Associated Press of Japan, so one thing is they can't make judgment calls. They can't say, and this is a bad thing, because they're just there to report the news. And the other thing is, those articles, the ones that were cited by people outside of Japan, were translated from Japanese. And sometimes the translation isn't so great. I tried to use a Kyodo News report a few months ago to say something about disability, and I had great difficulty. In fact, I had to give it up because you're never quite sure of a translation unless you can find the original text in Japanese. And oftentimes it's been translated by a newspaper like Japan Times, so maybe the translation isn't always so good. But some people felt that headline, so it said something like "Care Home Murder Investigators Mercy Killings," rang of endorsement that people in Japan were viewing this as a mercy killing rather than a murder. Let's be clear, the talking heads on NHK News and other channels and in the print media, nobody sees Sagamihara, what Satoshi Uematsu did, as a mercy killing. Nobody. Zero. Nada. That is just simply what was reported. That is how Uematsu described it in a letter he wrote to the Speaker of the Lower House, Mr. Oshima, outlining what he was going to do. Now, I contend that Uematsu is not well, but it's dangerous to speculate, but he's either a psychopath or he's a paranoid schizophrenic or something like that. He is not well. And yeah, don't take his views as being representative. But there's one other issue, and it's difficult to disagree sometimes with people about this, and that's the decision by the police not to reveal the names. And again, someone jumped in on this as if it's saying something else. The press have an embargo with the parents. At least two of the names have been released because the parents of those victims spoke about it. They were both victims who lived, as a matter of fact, I think. To double check, at least one of them was. But yeah, there's no press embargo. My question about that is it that the police simply said, well, these parents probably don't want their child's name to be released, so we will just say we won't release them? Because there is a genuine question about is there a culture of shame about disability in Japan? And I can tell you this from not my experience, but my wife's experience, my wife's mother's experience, who the latter, by the way, very angry about this, about the not giving of the names. My wife had trouble remaining sometimes in secondary school because there was a presumption that a disabled person just wouldn't want to go to secondary school, and her mum really had to fight to keep her in. Credit to her, she did, and now the wife is a professor or something at a university. So yes, I'm pretty convinced there is a culture of shame in Japan about disability. It's just I also have another, and I would want to say this also. You should check out, and I'll put a link below, I think, to this. Suzanne Kamata writing about this in a blog she wrote, saying, tell us the names. It's just not right that these people be invisible. And she is the mother of a child with multiple disabilities and of course lives in Japan. So yeah, check that out. I just have one thought though, as a disabled son of parents who have a disabled child. If I should die in a tsunami or an earthquake or a severe hate crime in Japan, please, media, do not go and question them. If they have something to say, they will talk to you. But I think what I don't like is there's an instinct towards them to make an example of certain events and the people in those events, and I think that's the mistake sometimes. And there is one final thought, and I wrote a blog post about this, and I will put it down below here. And that's that I think it might just be the lack of media attention abroad and a little bit in Japan could be simply because this happened in Japan. There is a certain type of story which is guaranteed to make the news if it happens in Japan. If there's an earthquake or a typhoon, or if it's to do with weird Japan, which is nearly always to do with anime, manga, robots, or having sex with robots, or how no one's having sex with anyone. Those are the weird Japan stories. The latter is about the declining birth rate. And it's difficult sometimes to argue with those stories because they are sort of newsworthy. The birth rate here is weirdly low. So it kind of is true. But those are the only sort of stories. A story about disabled people being killed or being denied their rights isn't probably going to make a lot of attention abroad. And I'll give you an example of another sort of thing similar to it. In 2013, the Mainichi Shimbun, which is a left-wing tabloid essentially, think somewhere between the Daily Mirror and the Washington Post. Well, that's not a tabloid, but you get the idea. You sort of, you're left-wing. It certainly likes to agitate. And it reported a story that 19 of the prefectures had totally gutted its funding, just simply cancelled its programs for the training of social workers that deal with people with disabilities. In other words, they basically no longer had a program to deal with disabled people. Did that get reported abroad? Of course not, because no body count was involved, no earthquake was involved, no typhoon was involved, and it didn't fall under the Weird Japan section of the newspaper. Now that may be rather cynical of me, and I would want to say every so often there are really good journalists who get stuff sneaked through, and I'll give some names. David McNeill of the Irish Times and The Economist, and sometimes with The Independent when it was a print media. Hiroki Tabuchi of the New York Times, Jake Edelstein of various online journals, and sometimes of the Japan Times, and recently of The Guardian, which is well published in. Justin McCurry, The Guardian's man in Tokyo. All of these people print what I would call non-standard Japanese stories, not to mention the Japan Times. Google Philip Braysor, Brasor, Philip with one L. He writes a lot about disability actually recently for his media mix section on Sunday. In fact, it's fair to say when it isn't me, it's him talking about disability. Anyway, rant over, but I'm going to start perhaps doing more of this Cripple and Kansai series again. Not all of it is about this, some of it's actually rather positive. There's lots of positive things to say about Japan, and if you want to check out those things, check out Accessible Japan. Not just because I write for it, it's just a really good website that talks all about how to see Japan as a disabled person. Links will be below. See ya. Bye.